Master Mage, Season 1, Episode 2. Deal with the Demon Fish. After helping Chow, haunted by the King of Frogs, Master Jackie and Student Fang walked home in the previous video. While they were hearing Tien come to find them to help a villager, he was infected by a mysterious disease. At the edge of the village, near the river, there was a fisherman. He was Bao, a very kind-hearted man who was always willing to help people around. People always showed their respect to the fisherman. One day, as usual, he came to the river for fishing. But unlike usual, that particular day, every time he threw his net to the river then pulled up, the net got full of fish. He felt very especially enjoyable that day, in the middle of the quietly flowing river and high blue sky. He was singing and pulling his nets up. At the third pull, that was the heaviest one ever. Bao got overexcited. He tightly held the strings and pulled it towards his boat. He gave a slight smile and thought that he must have loaded with a bunch of potential fish in his net. After a long while of struggling to pull the heavy net out of the water, he finally was able to make it. Unlike his thought, which was a school of fishes, that was merely one fish but a big heavy fish, which must have been nearly a meter long and struggling inside his net. Bao was born and raised in a poor family. From the day he turned 10 years old, he followed his father and boated on the river no matter it was sunshine or rain. In short, he had grown up along the river. At that moment, for the first time, he was frozen and astonished for a long while in front of his achievement. He had caught a school of fishes already and seen multiple kinds. However, it was the first time he had caught and seen a big fish like that. Bao was on cloud 9 and laughed out loud. He hit the jackpot. He stood there, stared at the struggling big fish inside his net for a while. He thought that the fish cost a lot of money for sure, and he was going to buy his wife and kids some good food and new clothes that day. Just thinking about the bright future, he was unable to stop the smile in his mouth. Finally, God had sent him a special gift for his kindness and hard work. After that, Bao didn't think of throwing his net any other time. The big fish was enough for the day. He whistled happily, and shortly he prepared to head back. Once his boat reached the river bank, he quickly found a trolley and pushed the fish to his booth at the market. He tried to bring the fish to the market as soon as possible because the more fresh the fish was, the more money he could earn. And indeed, the big fish attracted a lot of attention from the villagers. Everyone buzzed about the fish. Eventually, everyone in the market had a look at his booth. But unlike what he had thought, no one asked after and wanted to buy the giant fish. In contrast, people were just likely too afraid about it. People just shook their heads and passed by his booth. A kind old man stopped by and advised him, if a fish turned that big, it must have been well cultivated. No one had a gut to kill it. People around spoke up when the old man said it right, how they could kill that big fish. And then, people gathered around Bao. They told him to release the giant fish to the river. The big fish was probably the descendant of God of the river. He should not hurt the giant fish. Otherwise, he would have been punished by God of the river. One by one, people consecutively advised Bao to release the fish. He got disappointed. The bright scene he had imagined about earlier was shut down in front of him at that moment. Bao contemplated what he should do next. Then, he shouted out loud angrily that he wanted them to stop talking. He was about to make a big stew fish dish. Villagers got surprised by his decision. He didn't take any of their advice and got angry afterward. Out of mind, Bao thought the villagers were afraid of the giant fish, so they didn't want to buy it. No matter how much he convinced them, they were not going to change their mind. He decided to bring the giant fish home, then eat it to prove people's thought was wrong. He was way too ignorant, at that moment, to believe that a demon could hurt him out. As a determined man, without a second thought, Bao brought the giant fish home. He used the sharpest knife in the house, cut the fish out. Shortly, he had finished cutting the fish into slices. He chose the most delicious slices and put to the pot. As a result of that, a tasty stew fish pot had finished. After that, the ignorant man brought the pot to the market. He wanted to prove that the giant fish was just like the other fishes and could eat it. He yelled out to attract people's attention one more time. He ate it in front of the gathered people without hesitation. He continued, "See, I'm eating a big slice of the giant fish, and nothing happens." In a blink of an eye, in the middle of the market, even though the stew fish pot was still very hot, but Bao had half finished the dish. He laughed aloud and boasted that the fish was very delicious. He looked at those people and shamed them since they didn't have a chance to taste the giant fish. People started being interested in him and gathering around him. He was having a good meal, and nothing happened to him yet. People exchanged their eyes and gazed at Bao. An old man spoke up, they should buy some and have a try. Didn't wait for the old man to finish. Someone yelled aloud, "Bao got a problem." In no time, all of the people's eyes were on Bao. His face got red. He was likely to get itchy. He scratched his arms and all around his body. After a few moments, Bao's body got scratched. He also shed blood, and his skin swelled red. He was likely to be turned into a monster and consecutively scratched his body. His skin got opened, and his blood was spilling out, exposed some fish scales under his skin. At that moment, he yelled out because of severe pain. The more he scratched his body, the more fish scales came out of his skin. Just a few seconds, he turned to be a fish. People got terrified already. An old lady screamed out what happened to him. Her scream interested people. They came and gathered around Bao, buzzing about what happened to him but taking no action to save the poor man. They were scared and supposed that was the punishment of the god of the river because Bao had eaten the giant fish. Fortunately, besides those cold-hearted people, there were also kind people. Tian and Wang passed by. They had heard the painful screams from Bao and got startled. They saw the fish scales on Bao's body and exchanged their surprised looks. The two of them came towards him and figured how to help him out. In no time, Wang picked up Bao to his booth and asked Tian to come to find Master Jackie to check up. Tian was walking by Master Jackie and told the master everything. Hearing all of that, the master angrily shouted out, "How the freak Bao could do that? A meter fish was obviously a sacred animal. Such an ignorant man not to take any of people's pieces of advice and killed the fish." They walked faster and arrived at the market shortly. They rushed to Bao's booth. People gathered around the place and kept an eye on him, full of curiosity. Tian shouted out in haste, "Master Jackie came. Please dismiss to let him in." He wanted to dismiss people around who were blocking the way. At that moment, Bao's family had been there. Hearing Tian, they turned back and saw Master Jackie walked inside. They gave a light sigh since they trusted in Master Jackie. Master Jackie stepped inside and nodded to greet them. He stepped towards Bao, who was losing his consciousness already. His skin was turned to be fish scales. He was eye-rolled, wide mouth opened, and looked very creepy. Jackie had years of experience with these kinds of stuff. He read the scene at first glance and asked Fang to give him the willow leaves. Jackie straightened his back, held the leaves in his fingers, then started stirring his fingers around while mumbling the incantation repeatedly. His fingers started glowing a yellow glow. Finally, he stopped his fingers by his eyebrows and shouted out loud, "Open." Jackie's eyes turned red out of the blue. That was the yin-yang eye technique he had been hard trained in years with his master. After opening the yin-yang eye, he could see the spirits clearly around. After opening his magic eyes successfully, without hesitation, he turned his eyes towards the bed where the unconscious Bao was lying there. A normal person would see Bao's body merely in the bed, but there was a demon within Bao's skin to Jackie. Jackie spoke up to the demon fish and demanded to have a compromise. At that moment, the demon fish, who got a creepy face, was aware of the abilities of Jackie. He got out of the poor man's body and straightened up to talk to Jackie. He angrily shoved his bare, sharpened teeth in front of Jackie, and spoke up that he didn't want to talk to Jackie. What Bao was suffering was about to pay off what he did to him. Jackie stood there silently and all ear to the demon fish. The demon fish was about to turn into a dragon. With his long years of cultivated, just a few more years, he would reach 100 years of cultivation. How he could accept the fact that all of his hard work had been ruined by this mortal, and was unable to let Bao go. Jackie replied that he knew that dragon turning was not easy. The demon fish must have experienced 72 challenges during his long cultivation. If the demon fish failed in any of those challenges, everything was ruined, and he had to start it over. But that was likely a destiny. Let's move on with that. Let the grudge go and turn it into a good thing. Jackie convinced the demon fish that if he went easy on Bao, he would tell Bao to carve him a statue and worship him later on. Even though Master Jackie spoke up out loud those words, but deep down, he felt it was funny. Dragon turning was really not an easy job to do. The fish trained his mind hard in years but got upset and messed things up because of dying before he reached a 100-year milestone and had a grudge against people. Still, he didn't want to argue with the demon fish. Bao was also at fault. The old man suggested Bao worship the demon fish to have a place to return and didn't roam around to hurt innocent people later on. After hearing what Master Jackie was trying to say, the demon fish got angrier. He wide opened his mouth as if he wanted to swallow the old man. He yelled out in front of the old man how he could let it go easy, and did the old man think that he was easy to deal with? At that moment, Fang lost his patience. He showed the boar in his face, yawned aloud, and said that Jackie Master should end this conversation. He was hungry already and wanted to have something to eat, then head home. Master Jackie should not take time to convince that stubborn demon. Jackie didn't take any of Fang's words. He contemplated and realized what the demon fish desired. The demon didn't stop at being powerful as a dragon and wanting people to worship him, but another thing bigger. The demon fish felt humiliated after hearing Fang. He angrily shouted out that if they wanted him to go easy on the villagers, let's build him a shrine, and must have maintained at least 10,000 people to worship him. He didn't want to put his statue in a remote place. He would obsess Bao's body forever if there were merely Bao's family worship him. Jackie could not hold his temper any longer. That demon fish was way too stubborn. If he was not easygoing, Jackie had to use his magic to acquire it. His eyes turned sharp, and he stared at the demon fish angrily and told the demon fish that as he wished, what goes around come around. Then he spelled the incantations, pointed his finger to the sky, and yelled out, "Open the portal." Out of the ceiling, at that moment, a circle emerged and spun around. It spun faster and faster. In no time, it turned a tornado out of the ceiling. The booth got shaken badly due to it. It felt like the booth was able to fly up any time. Stuff around the booth was flying towards the tornado as well. After opening the portal, Master Jackie pointed towards the demon fish and yelled at him. He could not deal with the demon, so there was only acquiring him to keep him away from the human beings. The demon fish got terrified in front of Jackie's power. He could see Jackie was strong earlier, but he could not imagine how talented Jackie was until then. The demon fish had regretted it already. The demon fish bore a demonic face, but he got a small gut. His body got shaken too bad to stand up straight. He got overwhelmed in front of Master Jackie's aura. He decided to bow his head down and negotiate once again about what he had refused earlier. He gave a fake smile at Jackie and told him that he just made a joke. They could carve him a golden statue, and he would go easy on the villagers for good. Master Jackie fathomed the condition. He tended to negotiate with the demon fish so that he could save the poor man's life. Fang understood what his master was thinking. He was not satisfied with his master's decision and spoke up to the demon about how dare the demon could raise such an irrational condition to his master, who was at fairy level already. The demon fish was merely a small shallow demon, not saints or Buddhas. Fang persistently offended his master's decision. He unconsciously poured up a bowl of stew fish. While stepping to his master, he was nearly putting the slice of fish to his mouth. Master Jackie angrily turned around and threw the bowl away. He glared at the wooden stick nearby and stepped towards the demon. He replied that he would take a step back and carve him a wooden statue. The demon didn't dare to cross the line any further. He nodded his head and agreed with Jackie. He spoke up that he should have had a good carve. The old man gave a light sigh. The mess was likely to be settled down, not to take any longer. He told Fang to bring him a knife. He put the wooden stick on the table and started to carve the demon fish a statue. With his agility, he was likely to carve multiple times earlier. While the old man was carving, Fang could not give up on the demon fish. They had put up a word fight. Fang was upset with his master's solution, so he poured out another bowl of fish in the pot, then put it inside his mouth. He was eating while provoking the demon fish. Eventually, the demon fish got mad at him. When Fang put his guard down, the demon stepped slowly towards him. Once the demon fish touched Fang, he felt a strong power pushed him away so that he fell afar into the ground. Seeing that, Fang intentionally explained with a smirk when he turned back on the demon. He got a protection spell on him. Those demons, like the fish, could not touch him an inch and asked if the demon dared to go within his body. That was obvious since the day Fang followed Jackie to roam around. For Fang's safety, Master Jackie had spelled protection magic on him so that no matter how much effort the demon fish spent, he would be unable to touch Fang. The demon fish grinned his teeth out and looked at Fang angrily as if he wanted to drag Fang with him into hell. In a short amount of time, Master Jackie had done with the statue. He heard the noise behind, so he glared at Fang and gave a sign that was enough messing around. Fang stepped towards his master, and surprising from what he eyewitnessed, he shouted out how Jackie knew that technique. People around came closer to see. All cheered up for Jackie's talent. Just in a short amount of time, he had turned an ugly wood into a fish. It was very unreal. Out of curiosity, the demon fish came closer to have a look as well. Seeing his own statue, the demon fish got overexcited. Even though the shape was a little weird, he was very satisfied. He felt that after all of those long years of cultivation and bringing a desire of being worshipped by people had been fruitful already. He felt like he was mighty as same as saints and fairies. At that point, he had a strange release for all of his grudge or anger. They all had gone. He smiled because his wishes had become true. Then he turned to be a blue glow and got inside the statue. After the demon had gone, Bao got a reaction. Bao opened his eyes and threw his eyes around. Tien happily rushed towards him and told him how Master Jackie had saved his life. Bao was likely to recall something. He put his hands to his body and checked. The fish scales had gone completely along with the itchy. Bao just came back from his demise. To him, at that moment, Master Jackie was like a fairy. he knelt down and repeatedly said thank you in front of the old man. Master Jackie picked him up. He told Bao that he knew how hard life was, but Bao should be aware of Saint and Fairy's existence. Everything has its limitation. He should not slaughter that much. Once, he saw a giant fish out of the ordinary, so he must have been careful. Just well-cultivated fishes could be at that size. He was lucky enough because the demon fish was an easy-going one. Otherwise, he must have lost his life already. Bao bowed his head and tried to remember what Master Jackie had told him. Later on, he had a lesson. He did not only worship the demon fish but also did not slaughter the other animals much if it was unnecessary. After all, it was midnight already. Master Jackie said goodbye to everyone at the market and headed home along with his student. The villagers stood there and watched after his walks until his shadow had gone completely out of the market. The two of them walked back home. Not long later, from behind, the two men ran by them in such a hurry. One of them hit Fang, but he was way too hurried to stop by and give Fang a proper apology and continuing the run. Fang was not letting him go with that. How a gentleman could be that rude. He yelled out loud at the man that he better apologized for hitting Fang. The two men were wearing their big hats so that Fang could not see their faces clearly. They ignored him and ran ahead. Being ignored, Fang got angrier. At that point, the old man sensed something strange about the two men just passed by them. They were in such a hurry with their heavy breeze, but lifeless. Master Jackie stood by, silently watched them from behind. He learned that one of them was injured. Blood spilled out of his hand and dripped to the ground. He sensed something bad was about to happen. He examined the trail of blood that had been left. He sat down to check it carefully and realized it was not fresh blood but a black, dense blood trail. Seeing the master was immobilizing and staring at something on the ground, he spoke up what Jackie had found if that was money. Master Jackie came closer to Fang, showed him the tint of blood on his finger. He said that it was not a living human being's blood. He thought that was zombies' blood and was afraid that those zombies were capable of hurting innocent people. He wanted to tail them,